Most people know about Zion National Park due to its famous hikes such as Angel's Landing, the Narrows, or the Subway. However, as you'll see in today's video about Cascade Falls, this park has so much more to offer. The trail starts right before the second tunnel. It has an overall distance of 2.2 miles and an elevation gain of right around 460 feet. And it winds its way through some waterfalls that were dry at the time of our visit, as well as a tunnel and some slot canyons. Due to the canyons, if you plan on attempting this hike, you need to check the weather not only in Zion, but in the surrounding areas as well. These areas are very susceptible to flash floods, and we want to make sure that everyone stays safe. A short ways into the hike, we came to our first obstacle, which is this slick rock section. The sandstone here is super grippy, and this one was not very steep, so we made it up with no problem. But there are more challenging climbs up ahead. In fact, one of the trickier climbs was just a little bit further down the trail. At first it kind of looked like a dead end, but then we looked a little bit closer and we noticed a climbable spot on the far left side. If you have climbing skills and grippy shoes, this probably will not be a challenge at all. Neither will anything else in this canyon actually. As we made our way towards the top, the canyon started to open up with gorgeous views of emerald green pools that were cradled by towering sandstone monoliths. This video was shot during the spring runoff, so there was no shortage of water in the pools, or as they are otherwise known, potholes. One cool thing about the water in the potholes is that the water is perfectly still. So if you lined up your camera just right, you could get some really cool reflections of the surrounding mountains in your pictures. There are also some really interesting rock textures and formations here if you want to do some abstract nature photography. At this point in the short hike, the trail is going to be continually switching back and forth from sandy washes to slick rock sections. We are now approaching what we are calling the second obstacle. Even though it's not completely vertical like the first tiny waterfall that we climbed up, it is still very steep and it is a whole lot taller. Not only are you a lot higher up, but there are several potholes that you will have to navigate around. And if the sandstone is either wet or has loose sand on it, it can get very slippery and you could be taking a quick ride back down to the bottom. This is not a very popular trail, so if you fall and injure yourself, it can be quite a while before someone else comes along. This is why we always bring a tracker like the Garmin InReach that lets us not only communicate with our families, but radio for help if we need it. After you get past the second obstacle, we have good news for you, because things are going to get quite a bit easier for a while. This is not a maintained trail, so there is a good chance you'll encounter some fallen trees, a bunch of rocks, and maybe even some bighorn. But as far as climbing goes, you are done with the trickiest parts until it's time to climb down it on the way back. Even though this hike is barely over 2 miles long, all of the stump hopping and rock scrambling and climbing makes it feel like much more of a decent hike. But if you still have a ton of energy once you're done hiking here, you can head just up the road to hike Many Pools and Many Pools' Unknown Neighbor. We will have the link to both of those videos in the upper corner. We've been pretty lucky with our bighorn sightings lately, and seeing this little baby was the icing on the cake for this hike. If you encounter bighorns, please be sure to give them plenty of space. As beautiful of an animal as they are, if you get too close, they will not hesitate to kick your butt. They may not look like it when they're up on the hillside, but they can weigh over 200 pounds. Add 2 giant horns to that and you have an animal that you don't want slamming into you full speed. One thing to note about this trail is that we don't exactly know if it has a defined end. Our research said that this trail was just over 2 miles, and that's what we did. But since it's not a defined trail, you're not going to see a sign or a waypoint at the end where you're going to be like, oh, this is it. I will say, however, that the trail does get quite a bit trickier once you get into this narrow slot that you see here. But curiosity had gotten the best of us and we didn't want to miss anything cool, so we pushed on a little bit further. Since we were visiting in the wetter months, we did encounter water in a couple of spots and it ended up forcing us to climb up and out of the slot. We did see some footprints, so it didn't appear that we were the first ones that thought to climb up and out of the slot, but if you come during a drier month, you can just probably skip this little detour. But even if you do get to skip it, there is a small 5 or 6 foot waterfall that you would have to climb to get to this next part. As we dropped back down into the canyon, the trail's conditions were about to deteriorate even a little bit further. If you're not looking for a challenge, I would probably recommend turning back at the detour. It's not that the trail ahead gets dangerous or challenging, But there are just a ton of rocks and fallen trees that you're going to have to navigate your way around. We can only assume that since this part of the canyon is so narrow that it becomes a catch-all every time a flash flood comes through. And that is why you don't want to be in the canyon during one, because there's no chance you're going to outrun all of this debris. Since V and I are so stubborn when it comes to hikes that don't have a defined end, we kept being like, okay, we'll go to this next corner and then we'll turn back. And then we'd get there and we'd be like, oh, maybe we'll go one more corner and then we'll turn back. But finally the conditions on the trail had gotten so bad that the beauty of the hike was being outweighed by the challenge of the trail. So we came to the agreement that we had seen enough and it was time to start heading back. If you've done this hike before and you went even further in, please let us know in the comments below if we missed anything further down the trail. This is an out and back trail, so you will be obviously heading back the same way that you came in. One of the main challenges that you're going to face on the way back though is that some of these slick rock waterfalls that you climbed up are going to be a little bit on the intimidating side when it's time to climb down. Similar to trails like many pools and its neighbor, you will be getting really nice views down the canyon on your way back to the car. For being a fairly short and somewhat unknown trail, this hike really does have a lot of fun sections to it. With all of the canyoneering and random adventures that V and I go on, sometimes it's nice to see something that takes a normal hike and makes it just a little bit more special. And climbing back down this sketchy waterfall definitely gave us what we were looking for. And even though we like a good challenge, we were definitely grateful for the grippy sandstone at this point. If this was polished granite or something similar, I'm not sure that most people could get down it safely. At this point, you pretty much have one more challenging spot left, and it's that first waterfall that you climbed up. I don't think it's anywhere near as tricky as the one that we just came down, but as you'll see in a second, if you're slightly on the shorter side, it can be a little bit reachy. V really didn't end up needing much help. I just pointed out some of the good footing options and she was down in no time. The only thing that we did differently on the way back is we went through the tunnel rather than going up and running across the road back to the car. We were really surprised with as much water as we saw in the canyon that there wasn't some in the tunnel as well. And after the tunnel, you are just one more short but quite steep climb back to the car. And that's gonna do it for this video. Stay tuned because we have more awesome Zion content coming in the next couple of weeks. If you enjoy our adventures, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Check us out on Instagram at @thatadventurelife_official. And for all the information about this hike and other awesome things to do in Zion, head on over to thatadventurelife.com.